The Illusion of Life by Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnston.
This book is dedicated to Walt Disney and the staff of artists who brought the magical quality of life to character animation. Contents are preface, acknowledgments, Chapter 1, An Artform is Born, Chapter 2, The Early Days, 1923 to 1933, 3, The Principles of Animation, 4, Discovery, 1934 to 1936, 5, Cartoon Comes of Age, 6, Appeal and Dynamics, 7, Hyperion, The Explosion, 8, Burbank and the Nine Old Men, 9, Our Procedures, 10, How to Get It on the Screen, 11, The Disney Sounds, 12, The Follow-Up Functions, 13, The Uses of Live Action in Drawing Humans and Animals, 14, Story, 15, Character Development, 16, Animating Expressions and Dialogue, 17, Acting and Emotions, 18, Other Types of Animation and the Future, and then Notes, Appendices, and Index. Preface. This book is about Disney character animation, an art form that created such world-famous cartoon figures as Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck. Disney animation makes audiences really believe in those characters, whose adventures and misfortunes make people laugh and even cry. There is a special ingredient in our type of animation that produces drawings that appear to think and make decisions and act of their own volition. Ooh. It is what creates the illusion of life. No other studio has been able to duplicate this most important but least understood element in our films. It cannot be produced by money alone. When a producer says he is going to make a Disney-type film, you may think that full animation, nice color, and the large budget are all that is needed. But Disney animation is more than drawing, or animating, or storytelling, or painting. It is what this book is all about. In tracing the development of character animation rather than the studio or the men in it, inevitably, we will leave out the names of many fine artists. We regret slighting anyone, but we regret even more having overlooked a key scene in animation history or a special sequence in a picture that would have helped explain and clarify our meaning. It is perhaps misleading to credit specific artists with the drawings we show in the book, since this might imply that both the idea and the style came from one person. This was seldom the case. So much of our own work appears here simply because it was all that was available after so many years. Animators usually do not save the thumbnail sketches, character drawings, or experimental plans that reveal the most important stages in developing a personality or a piece of business. In any case, the emphasis here is on the research rather than the people who did the drawings. One of the most rewarding parts of this project has been the interviews with old friends and colleagues, enabling us to gain perspective and insight on events that had gone whizzing by back when we were too busy to notice or praise. Occasionally one individual disagreed with another over interpretation and even recollections, but then arguments were always daily occurrences when we were making the pictures. That was an important part of the team effort. Many will look to this book to teach them the secrets of Disney animation so they can become instant successes. Unfortunately, this craft cannot be learned by just reading a book, and not overnight under any circumstances. Our original intention had been to write a book on how to animate, hoping we could offer inspiration rather than something to copy. But as we did our research, it became obvious that there was a greater need to record just how the special kind of animations had developed. Those times were unique and will never be duplicated, yet much of what was learned has been valid in the theater for several hundred years, and continues to be valuable wherever there is communication with an audience. We felt that this wealth of knowledge in animation should be preserved. Ron Miller, executive head of all production at the Disney Studios, hoped to double the staff of animators by 1981, but he found, even after an intensive search, that there just aren't that many people capable of doing animation in the Disney style. What is the Disney style? Can it be explained? We hope so. This book is written for the student who wants to know how Disney animation was done, for the historian who wants to know why it was done that way, for the artist who has never realized the potential of animation as a profession, for the general public who still wonders what really makes them move. We hope that some readers will be stimulated to carry on these traditions and elevate this art form to an even higher level. Acknowledgements. This book belongs to the people, past and present, of Walt Disney Productions, whose cooperation and assistance made it all possible. Special thanks must go to the executives E. Carden Walker, Ron Miller, and Vince Jeffords For without their continued support over the 4 long years we spent putting it together, this book would never have been written. We wish to thank the many departments who were more helpful than their jobs required. In alphabetical order, they are the animation research team under Leroy Anderson, who stored the artwork from each picture in the basement catacombs and archives, Dave Smith and Paula Sigmund, who tracked down information, checked names and dates and spellings and titles and locations, art props, whose skills and knowledge in salvaging and presenting materials were invaluable, the ladies in ink and paint, who furnished us with incredible work on the cells, the dedicated staff in the library, the crew in merchandising and publications, and Don McLaughlin, one of those. In particular, the cooperative men still camera and their indomitable leader Dave Spencer. We are indebted to them all. We also are grateful for the encouragement received in November 1979 from Diane Disney Miller's warm response to our manuscript in its first complete form. We were very fortunate to have our editor, the patient and scholarly Walton Rawls. His sensitive contributions showed a remarkable understanding of our purposes that was both reassuring and appreciated. Our thanks also go to our sympathetic publisher, Robert E. Abrams, whose personal interest in the project and determination to make a quality book of our writings and sketches inspired us to an even more critical approach to our work. The day after Walt died, Willie Reitherman said, "From this day on it will never be like it was, but only as each person remembers it." We want to express our appreciation to the following people who helped us remember the way it was: Ed Ardle, James N. Alger, Ken Anderson, William Anderson, Xavier Tencio, Art Babbitt, Ted Berman, Al Bertino, Carlton Jack Boyd, Roger Bragi, Bob Broughton, Les Clark, Ron Clements, Larry Clemens, Claude Coates, Evelyn Coates, Ed Cook, Bill Cottrell, Art Cruikshank, Jack Cutting, Mark F. Davis, Lou Debney, Hal Dempster, Don Duckwall, Becky Fahlberg, Vance Jerry, Blaine Gibson, George Jopper, Floyd Jotfredson, Joe Grant, Don Griffith, Betty Ann Gunther, Dave Hand, Ed Hansen, T. He, John Hench, Dick Humer, Wilfred Jackson. Oh God. Bill Justice, Glenn Keane, Richmond Dick Kelsey, Dick Humer. Ooh. Richmond Dick Kelsey, Catherine Kerwin, Betty Kimball, Ward Kimball, Eric Larson, Finney Littlejohn, Ann Lloyd, Mrs. Ham, Frankie Lusk, Eustace Lysett, Jim McDonald, Bob McCree, Bill McFadden, Bob McIntosh, Dave Michener, one of those, Clarence Nash, Grim Natwick, Maurice Noble, Cliff Nordberg, Ken O'Brien, Ken O'Connor, Dave Oliver, Bill Pete, Ken Peterson, Elmer Plummer, Martin Provenson, Wolfgang Reitherman, Leo Salkin, Milt Schaefer, Ben Sharpstein, Mel Shaw, Art Stevens, Standy Strother, Herb Taylor, Mary Tebb, Ruthie Thompson, and Tom Wilhite. That was a hard one, guys. Chapter 1. An art form is born. It begins with a quote: "Animation can explain whatever the mind of man can conceive." It's a quote by Walt Disney. Man always has had a compelling urge to make representations of the things he sees in the world around him. As he looks at the creatures that share his daily activities, he first tries to draw or sculpt or mold their forms in recognizable fashion. Then, when he becomes more skillful, he attempts to capture something of a creature's movements, a look, a leap, a struggle, and ultimately, he seeks to portray the very spirit of his subject. For some presumptuous reason, man feels a need to create something of his own that appears to be living, that has an inner strength, vitality, a separate identity, something that speaks out with authority, a creation that gives the illusion of life. 25,000 years ago, in the caves of southwestern Europe, Cro-Magnon man made astounding drawings of the animals he hunted. His representations are not only accurate and beautifully drawn, but many seem to have an inner life combined with a suggestion of movement. Since that time, we have been inundated with artists' attempts to shape something in clay or stone or paint that has life of its own. Certain artists have achieved marvelous results. Sculptures that are bursting with energy, paintings that speak with strong inner forces, carvings and drawings and prints that have captured a living moment in time. But none can do more than suggest what happened just before, or what will happen after that particular moment has passed. Yet, through all the centuries, artists continued to search for a medium of expression that would permit them to capture the elusive spark of life, and in the late 1800s, new inventions seemed at last to make that possible. Along with improvements in the motion picture camera and the development of a roll film capable of surviving the harsh mechanisms of projecting its images, a new art form was born: animation. By making sequential drawings of a continuing action, an artist could represent the actual figure, if he chose, meticulously capturing its movements and actions, or he could caricature it, satirize it, ridicule it. And he was not limited to mere actions. He could show emotions, feelings, even innermost fears. He could give reality to the dreams of the visionary. He could create a character on the screen that not only appeared to be living but thinking and making decisions all by himself. Most of all, to everyone's surprise, this new art of animation had the power to make the audience actually feel the emotions of a cartoon figure. What an amazing art form. It is astonishing that so few professionals have investigated its possibilities, for where else does the artist have such opportunities for self-expression? There is a new excitement to the familiar elements of drawing and design when they are shown heroic size on a large screen. But, more than that, the addition of movements opens the way of almost unlimited new relationships in all areas, and the wonders continue on into color. Even the brightest pigments on a painting can reflect back to the viewer only a limited amount of light. Their apparent brightness is relative to itself, a range from dark to light of about 20 to 1. But with the light intensity of a projection lamp and the highly reflective screen, this brightness factor increases to an exciting 200 to 1, 10 times as great. Just as the stained glass window has brought dazzling brilliance after centuries of relatively dull frescoes, the introduction of light behind the film made whole new ranges of color available to the artist. Add to this the potential for building color relationships in sequence for stronger emotional response, and the artist has before him an incredible medium for self-expression. But rewarding as an animation is, it is also extremely difficult. Still, once an artist sees his drawings come to life on the screen, he will never again be quite satisfied with any other type of expression. The unique challenge of this art form was aptly described by Vladimir Bill Titla, first animator to bring true emotions to the cartoon screen. It was mentioned that the possibilities of animation are infinite. It is all that and yet very simple, but try and do it. There isn't a thing you can't do in it as far as composition is concerned. There isn't a caricaturist in this country who has as much liberty as an animator here of twisting and weaving his lines in and out. But I can't tell you how to do it. I wish I could. Bill was speaking to a group of young animators who had been asking how he achieved his wonderful results on the screen. He answered simply, "To me, it's just as much a mystery as ever before. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. I wish I knew. Then I do it more often." The problem is not a single track one. Animation is not just timing or just a well-drawn character. It is the sum of all the factors named. No matter what the devil one talks about, whether force or form or well-drawn characters, timing or spacing, animation is all these things, not any one. What you as an animator are interested in is conveying a certain feeling you happen to have at that particular time. You do all sorts of things in order to get it. Whether you have to rub out 1,000 times in order whether you have to rub out 1,000 times in order to get it is immaterial. Conveying a certain feeling is the essence of communication in any art form. The response of the viewer is an emotional one, because art speaks to the heart. This gives animation an almost magical ability to reach inside any audience and communicate with all peoples everywhere, regardless of language barriers. It is one of animation's greatest strengths and certainly one of the most important aspects of this art for the young animator to study and master. As artists, we now have new responsibilities in addition to those of draftsman and designer. We have added the disciplines of the actor and the theater. Our tools of communication are the symbols that all men understand because they go back before man had developed speech. Scientist and author Jane Goodall reports that even lesser primates, such as a chimpanzee, have a whole complex nonverbal communication based on touch, posture, and gesture. These actions vary from an exchange of greetings when meetings to acts of submission, often with the arm extended and the palm turned down. When a top-ranking male arrives in any group, the other chimps invariably hurry to pay their respects, touching him with outstretched hands or bowing, just as courtiers once bowed before their king. Miss Goodall describes how a lone male passing a mother and her family responded to her greeting with a touch, as chimp etiquette demands, then greeted her infant, patting it gently on the head while it looked up at him with big staring eyes. Some 200 more signs that clearly display chimpanzee emotions, including preening, embracing, charging, kissing, and pounding. Chimps are apt to fling their arms around each other for reassurance, throw things in anger, steal objects furtively, and scream wildly with excitement. Most of these expressions of feelings and language symbols are well known to man, whether they are buried deep in his subconscious or still actively used in his own communicative behavior. Dogs, too, have a whole pattern of actions not only clearly understood by other dogs, but by man as well. Even without using sounds, dogs can convey all of the broad spectrum of emotions and feelings. There is no doubt when a dog is ashamed, or proud, or playful, or sad, or belligerent, sleepy, disgusted, indignant. He speaks with his whole body and in both attitude and movement. The actor is trained to know these symbols of communication because they are his tools in trade. Basically, the animator is the actor in animated films. He is many other things as well. However, in his efforts to communicate his ideas, acting becomes his most important device. But the animator has a special problem. On the stage, all of the foregoing symbols are accompanied by some kind of personal magnetism that can communicate the feelings and attitudes equally as well as the action itself. There is a spirit in this kind of communication that is extremely alive and vital. However, wonderful as the world of animation is, it is too crude to capture completely that kind of subtlety. If in animation we are trying to show that a character is sad, we droop the shoulders, slump the body, drop the head, add a long face, and drag the feet. Yet, those same symbols also can mean that the character is tired or discouraged or even listless. We can add a tear and pinpoint our attitude a little better, but that is the extent of our capabilities. The live actor has another advantage in that he can interrelate with others in the cast. In fact, the producer relies heavily on this. When he begins a live action picture, he starts with two actors of proven ability who will generate something special just by being together. There will be a chemistry at work that will create charisma, a special excitement that will elicit an immediate response from the audience. The actors will each project a unique energy simply because they are real people. By contrast, in animation, we start with a blank piece of paper. Out of nowhere, we have to come up with characters that are real, that live, that interrelate. We have to work up the chemistry between them, if any is to exist. Find ways to create the counterpart of charisma, have the characters move in a believable manner, and do it all with mere pencil drawings. That is enough challenge for anybody. These problems would seem to create considerable difficulties for achieving the communication claimed for animation. How can it work so wonderfully? It does it in a very simple way through what we call audience involvement. In our own lives, we find that as we get to know people, we share their experiences. We sympathize, we empathize, we enjoy. If we love them, we become deeply concerned about their welfare. We become involved in their lives. We involve the audience in our films the same way we start with something that they know and like. We involve the audiences in our films the same way. We start with something they know and like. It could be either an idea or a character, as long as it is familiar and appealing. It can be a situation everyone has experienced, an emotional reaction universally shared, a facet of someone's personality, easily recognized, or any combination of these. But there must be something that is known and understood if the film is to achieve audience involvement. In the great days of radio, there were many programs presented in such a special, intimate way that they drew the listening audience into their stories completely. The mystery programs were particularly good at this, using voices that reach out to you, and good sound effects, heavy breathing up close to the microphone, echoing footsteps, a creaky door. You were held spellbound. The broadcasts were projected through symbols into your imagination, and you made the situation real. It was not just what you heard, it was what the sounds made you believe and feel. It was not the actors' emotions you were sensing anymore, they were your emotions. Fortunately, animation works in the same way. It is capable of getting inside the heads of its audiences, into their imaginations. The audiences will make our little cartoon character sad, actually far sadder than we could ever draw him, because in their minds that character is real. He lives in their imaginations. Once the audience has become involved with your characters, and your story, almost anything is possible. For a character to be that real, he must have a personality, and preferably an interesting one. He must be as comfortable as an old shoe, yet as exciting as a new spring outfit. Spectators can laugh at a gag, be dazzled by a new effect, and be intrigued by something completely fresh. But all of this will hold their attention for barely 10 minutes. As Charlie Chaplin said of his own beginnings in the movie business, little as I knew about movies, I knew that nothing transcended personality. In addition to gags and effects, there must be a point of entry through which audiences can identify with the story situation, and the best way is through a character who is like someone they have known. He could be heroic, or bigger than life, or meaner than sin. But basically, he has to be human enough for the audience to understand him and identify with the problems he faces in the story. The great American mime and artist enters. We're gonna have to learn how to say that. It's A-N-G-N-A enters. Used to give her class the assignment of writing a postcard under imagined circumstances, because it is an action devoid of any interest whatsoever without the addition of personality. But once a strong personality is introduced, great possibilities suddenly become apparent. To begin with, it helps to develop a situation in which your imagined personality can function. Say that you are starting out on a tour. It is morning, and the bus is ready to leave. You have been urged to hurry up, but just then you remember that you forgot to put the cat out before leaving home. You must write a quick note to your neighbor who has the key, asking her to take care of things. Now, how would you write this card? If you have chosen a nervous, insecure, and disorganized personality in the first place, you will have almost unlimited bits of business to show, all facets of the character. The confusion, the panic, the fear of being left behind, the inability to phrase words so that they can make any sense, the flutter of imminent chaos and desperation. Or suppose the person writing the card is highly indignant, because the computer insists that he has not paid a certain bill, and has just sent him his last notice. Now, the words must be chosen with care. The computer and the company that has been stupid enough to own it must be told off in no uncertain terms. There will be no recourse for the incisive accusations you are setting down. You could be gleeful, enjoying each cruel word, or you could be triumphant as you think of better, stronger, more biting words, or you could be trembling with rage at the whole idea of the terrible effrontery of this mechanical age. Suppose the writer were lovesick and writing to his dream girl, probably the third such note that morning. A silly smile might become fixed on his face as he reveled in each sugary word. With half-closed eyes and heavy sighs, he would gaze into space, seeing a momentary vision of her previous face. They would be kissing on the card when he was finished, even a reluctance to drop it into the mailbox until he had sighed one last time and kissed the beloved name just once more. It is easy to see how the development of an individual personality in a story situation can make even the dullest action become entertaining. In addition to the personality, however, there should be a change in the initial action that will enable an animator to show more than one side of this personality. The more interesting character in the world is not very exciting when sitting and listening to a symphony concert. Our true personalities are best revealed by our reactions to a change we did not expect. Time chart 1923 to 1933. In 1923, Walt makes Alice's Wonderland in Kansas City. In August, Walt comes to Hollywood. Contract for Alice series, forms company with brother Roy. In 1924, joined by Ub Iwerks and friends from Kansas City. Turns out one picture a month. In 1925, the series of Alice grows successful. Staff grows to 12. New contract for one picture every 3 weeks. Buy property on Hyperion Avenue. Start building. In 1926, moved to a new studio on Hyperion. 1927, complete last Alice film, start new series with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. 1928, after 26 pictures, Walt loses rights to Oswald, starts new series with Mickey Mouse. Sound comes in between 1928 and 1929, right around the middle. November 18th, Steamboat Willie opens in New York. 1929, more space needed, building expanded. Use of sound makes Disney's foremost. Animators from New York begin arriving. First Silly Symphony, Skeleton Dance, Mickey's Choo Choo, animated train engine. 1930, staff increases to 30. Chain Gang has dog that later becomes Pluto. 1931, new buildings added for animators plus soundstage. Ugly Duckling, example of stronger stories. First layout man hired. 1932, Flowers and Trees, first cartoon in color. Start of art school at night. Personnel passes 100 in 1932, by the way. 1933, Three Little Pigs, astounding success, finances expansion and more study. Bottom of depression. Take a simple example of a golfer getting ready to make a crucial shot. He shows concentration and determination as he prepares for the important swing. Then, suppose he misses the ball entirely. His true character will be revealed at once. If he is Donald Duck, he will fly into a rage and blame the ball. If he is insecure and nervous, he will blame the club and promptly break it over his knee. Or if he is a popular amateur who has been off his game but has a sympathetic gallery trying to encourage him, his response will be bitter dejection, and you will have pathos in your story. Our goal in these studies is to make the audience feel the emotions of the characters, rather than appreciate them intellectually. We want our viewers not merely to enjoy the situation with a murmured, "Isn't he cute?" but really to feel something of what the character is feeling. If we succeed in this, the audience will now care about the character and about what happens to him, and that is audience involvement. Without it, a cartoon feature will never hold the attention of its viewers. The various aspects of what animation is, what it could do, and how it worked were learned slowly over the years. They were certainly not evident when the art form was first discovered, except in the epic works of Winsor McCay, the New York Herald's skillful cartoonist. Working essentially alone, he turned out several astounding films between 1911 and 1921. With some cartoon figures so convincing that he was accused of tracing them from photographs. In response, McCay drew a dinosaur for his next film, and incidentally discovered the importance of a cartoon character's personality in establishing rapport with the audience. Today, his films are historic classics, but in their time they were not commercially successful, and that forced McCay to return to newspaper work. His creations were virtually forgotten for 50 years. Others entering the animation field lacked McCay's awesome talents, and few attempted anything more than what was commercially acceptable. After all, in those early days, movies were still a novelty, and cartoons were added to the program only for amusement. They were not an important part of the show, and very little money came back to the studios that made them. Audiences responded to the gags in preposterous situations, so creative energies went into the search for different approaches, fresh angles, new tricks, rather than into making better pictures. When the men in the studio found a gimmick that was successful, they hung onto it tenaciously. Max Fleischer had his Out of the Inkwell series, and Pat Sullivan's studio produced Otto Mesmer's films of Felix the Cat. Animated comic strips, illustrated jokes, live action retimed and combined with drawings, and a variety of other efforts were made to ensure contract renewal for a struggling studio. Of all the early pictures, only the films about Felix suggested the idea of giving a character personality, but its creators had failed to develop this past rudimentary beginnings. Relying instead on visual tricks that got audience response, nothing then gave a clue to what animation might someday become, and no promising artists were attracted to the studios. Most people felt that by 1923, just about everything had been done that was possible, and exhibitors were looking in other directions for something new to keep their audiences laughing. This was a situation when Walt Disney entered the field, and he was not an immediate success. In fact, it was even surprising that he was able to get a toehold in this tough business of limited contracts and tight money. But Walt was a fighter and had great determination. He was no aesthetic artist living in a dream world. As he said, "I have been up against tough competition all my life. I wouldn't know how to get along without it." Any man with Walt's talents, but without his spirits and tenacity, would never have made it. There were constant battles, many defeats, endless disappointments. He lost the rights to his cartoon character, his staff, his contracts. And then when he finally began to achieve a bit of success, his studio became a prize to be taken over one way or another, and run out of business. Union jurisdictional problems plunged him as he developed new techniques, new equipment, and new ideas in entertainment. Yet, through it all, he never lost his love for people or his faith in their judgment. I am interested in entertaining people and bringing pleasure, particularly laughter, to others rather than being concerned with expressing myself with obscure creative impressions. Through those first years, Walt and his brother Roy struggled alone against the people who controlled the movie industry. In later decades, when Walt's back was to the wall, he had the support of his staff, whose loyalty and dedication to both their boss and their work kept them making sacrifices through days of uncertainty. When it came right down to it, most of us were more interested in keeping animation alive than we were in making money. We were beginning to sense the magnitude of the art form that we were discovering, and its potential held us like a magnet. Walt was basically a communicator, and in the animated film he found astounding potential for expressing his ideas. The cartoon drawing always had been a very simple and direct graphic form. Whether it was for social comment or just amusement, it had to present a unified single idea with nothing complicated, extraneous or contradictory in its makeup. When the cartoon was transferred to film, these elements still applied, and nothing was drawn that was not part of the idea. Background, costume, character, and expression were all designed for a succinct statement. Behind the character, there was only a horizon, or a house, or a rock to run into, but that was all. To include only objects that were needed for the idea became the basis for a language of drawings on film. Walt took this naturally, and if any of his staff introduced something wrong or confusing or vague, he was quick to notice and to educate the offender. Walt gradually added the more sophisticated graphic symbols of acting, presenting complicated ideas that had to be understood very quickly. We used to indicate how successfully drawings communicated these thoughts by saying they either read or didn't read. John Hench, one of the studio's most gifted artists, said, "We don't really know how much we learn here about using images to communicate, to develop a kind of visual literacy." At the time, none of us thought in those terms or stopped long enough to gain perspective on what was happening. The language of imagery was emerging as a separate art form of its own, requiring skills and disciplines different from those of related crafts. Not every artist could master the demands, and most failed to realize that they were involved in something quite different and exacting. "I think this is a little hard for people to understand," John continued. "The fact that you are developing a kind of language, and a very precise one. They figure the graphics are not precise at all. They're just sort of decorative. They're pleasant to look at. They're aesthetic, instead of understanding what the basic thing is about image. I don't know how else anyone could get this except in motion pictures, and particularly in cartoons. You sure don't get it in an art school. It is impossible to judge the films that were made, or the animation that was done, or even what is worth preserving in the methods that were used, without an understanding of this language of imagery that spoke so clearly from the screen, not drawings by themselves or paintings or isolated antics, but the visual symbols of communication." When the outstanding violinist Isaac Stern was asked the difference between the great and the truly great, he replied, "The ability to communicate." It is a key ingredient in every art form, and certainly the great strength of Walt Disney's genius. Walt was also a gambler when it mattered most. If he believed in an idea, he would risk absolutely everything to get it before the public. But he was also practical enough to work with what he had, rather than wait for what he wished he had. He would say, "I don't know if it's art, but I know I like it." And he felt intuitively that if he liked it, the rest of the world would like it too. If only he could find the right way to present it. Walt had a restless nature and never liked to do the same things twice. As he said for himself, "I can never stand still. I must explore and experiment. I am never satisfied with my work. I resent the limitations of my own imagination." Where others felt lucky if they could hang on to what they had, Walt was constantly searching for new ways, better ways, and especially ways that his small group of artists could handle. As many of them agreed in later years, one of Walt's greatest gifts was his ability to get you to come up with things you didn't know were in you, and that you'd have sworn you couldn't possibly do. As the audience response verified Walt's convictions about entertainment, he was able to fight for better contracts that brought in a little more money. Now he could begin to add to his staff men who had been better trained than artists who had a greater variety of talents. The Depression had begun, and young artists were faced with a bleak future, if any at all, in the commercial fields. The only two places for employment were the government-financed WPA and Disney's. In 10 years, the studio went from the raw vitality and crude, clumsy actions of Steamboat Willie to the surprising sophistication and glowing beauty of Snow White. Together, we at the Disney Studio had discovered many things about communicating with an audience. We were still to learn much more. We continue to experiment with many approaches to filmmaking and different uses of animation, from stop motion with cutouts, limited movement, stylized design, puppets, and 3D, to the full-cell animation. Whatever the method, the pictures that got the biggest response in the theaters were always the ones that achieved audience involvement by telling definite stories through rich personalities. It had begun with Mickey and Pluto, a cartoon boy and his dog, who appeared to think and suggested the spirit of life. Then, the silly symphonies portrayed emotions in their characters, and there had been a feeling of life. Finally, in the telling of the feature-length tales about specific characters who were convincingly real, the full illusion of life was achieved. The illusion of life is a rare accomplishment in animation, and it was never really mastered anywhere except at the Disney Studio. Of all the characters and stories and exciting dimensions of entertainment to come from that incubator of ideas, this is a truly unique achievement. This is what must be examined and explained, understood, and appreciated, taught to others, and passed on to the animator of the future. It came from new ways of thinking, ways of making a drawing, ways of relating drawings to each other. All the refinements in this language of imagery, but it also came from new ways of looking at stories. Ours were not written down in the usual way. They were drawn, because a few stimulating pictures could suggest far more about the potential entertainment in an episode than any page of words. More than that, our stories were kept flexible until long after the first animation had been done. Often a whole new character would appear from nowhere and take over the story. When we started Snow White, there was no Dopey in the cast, Pinocchio had no Jiminy Cricket, and Bambi had no Thumper. All of these characters evolved as the pictures developed. As Walt said, the best things in many of our pictures have come after we thought the story was thoroughly prepared. Sometimes we don't really get close to our personalities until the story is in animation. It was never too late to make a change. Nothing was ever said as long as the possibility existed that it could be made to relate better to the overall picture or communicate more strongly with the audience. We struggled to build interesting, appealing characters. Most of all, we worked to find ways to make the audience feel the emotions of the animated figures. Emotions the audience could relate to, identify with, and become involved in. All of this took study and desire and knowledge and inspiration and months of selection and building, but that is true of any great artistic accomplishment. Fine works have never been achieved easily nor without the exercise of constant critical judgment. This is why the world's greatest mime, Marcel Marceau, says of his own work, it takes years of study. You can't just walk out on the stage and do it. Marcel Marceau also said that his teacher, Etienne Decroix, had told him the principle of communication with an audience were the same ones in use 2,000 years ago. They had been handed down from teacher to student ever since. The entertainer's symbols that bring audience identification and arouse sympathetic feelings, as well as techniques used to portray emotions, to please, to excite, to captivate, and to entertain, have always been known by some. At Disney's, we learned them painfully and slowly by trial and error. Although we had the greatest of leaders, he was not strictly a teacher. Still, by learning the rules this way, we learn them thoroughly, and sometimes we think we may have added a few footnotes of our own to the historic lore of the theater. Most of our own work has been in only one small part of the vast field of animation. There are so many areas to be explored, drawings to be tried, emotions to be captured, effects to be created, new wonders to be seen. It is an exciting prospect. With electronic aids being perfected and new tools and materials being used, who can possibly foresee what lies ahead? It probably will not be another Walt Disney who will lead the way, but someone or some group of artists will surely discover new dimensions to delight and entertain the world. Hopefully this book will be their springboard.